Hi everybody. Today you're going to learn how to make your own commands in Java, which is such a powerful tool that you're going to use it for the entire rest of your programming career. I'm going to introduce this by using an analogy to math, because I think most of you have seen functions in math, and commands in Java work very similarly to functions in math, except that they're more flexible and more useful. So in math, you know that you can define functions. So you can say like let f of x be 2x plus 5, and that you can imagine this function as having an input and then doing something to the input and giving an output. So I want to try and highlight a couple of things about the subject you already know, because each of these things is going to be really important when you make your own commands in Java. So there's a difference between defining your function and using your function. If I just say let f of x equal 2x plus 5, I'm just saying what is f going to do to an input? I'm defining the action that this command is going to perform. And in Java, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to define your command before you ever use it. And when you define your command, you're just saying what do you want it to do and what's it named. So then down here, I'm going to use my function. I'll say let k be 5. And then here I'm taking my k value and I'm using it as an input to the f function. How do you know that k is the input and not p? It has to do with the position that k appears in. So you already know that whatever you put inside the parentheses, that's intended to be the input value for your function. So whatever you put in here, that's the value that's going to count as your x value. So when we do this in Java, it's going to work very similarly. And you've seen this before. In Java, whenever you have parentheses, sometimes you put a value inside the parentheses. And what that means is that's the input to your command. So step by step, what we would do if this was a Java program is we'd say k is 5. So I'd take that value 5, and I'd make that the input to my function. And in Java, what that does is it would take the value 5 and it would assign it to this variable x. So for us, x is going to be an input variable that holds the number that we want to do something to in our command. Then we would do whatever we were going to do with it. So 2 times 5 is 10, plus 5 is 15. And then this also defines the output for the function. So if I send 5 as the input, 5 gets assigned to x, then we do something to x, and then the output would be 15. And what happens to the output? Well, you got to look at the context where we're using the command. Here, f is the command. And so you already know that this entire expression here gets replaced by its output. So this entire expression is equivalent to the output. So I could think about this whole thing as being the same as 15. And so this is really the same as saying p is equal to 15. So let's see what all of this would look like if you redid it in Java. Here's a Java program, but we haven't actually defined the f function yet. So here's your public static void main. And here, this is how you would actually use the function if you had defined it. I would say f of 5, and then that would give 5 as an input. And whatever this function gives back as an output would get assigned to p. Okay, so how do we actually, but if you typed this into Java, you'd see that it would underline in red and it would say that it doesn't understand what f is. So I'm going to show you how to create this command that will take 5 as an input and do something with the input. So the first thing to know is where do you actually create, or where do you actually define the function? You have to do it outside of public static void main. So look for the closing brace, and then you define your own command using the same pattern. So public static, except I'm not going to say void. I'm going to leave this blank for the moment, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. And then you have f. And then you have parentheses. And then I'm going to say double x. And then I'm going to have an opening brace and a closing brace. Okay, so just like the mathematical definition up here, f is the name of the command. And in Java, whenever you're defining a command like this, whatever word you put right before the parentheses is the name of your command. By the way, you probably heard me say this already. In Java, commands are called methods. So this is called a method. And just like this example, the x is a variable that holds an input. So the same thing is true in Java. Right here, whatever is inside the parentheses, this is a declaration for a variable that holds the input that this function is supposed to do something with. And notice that if I wrote this on a line by itself, that looks like you're creating a new variable called x. And that's not an accident. It's because that's exactly what you're doing. Inside the parentheses, you're saying, I want to create a new variable x that's going to hold the input value. So this is an input variable. All right, so now we have to define what is the action that this command is supposed to do. So for our math function, we wanted it to compute a new answer. So let's do that same thing. I'm going to say double A for answer equals 2 times x plus 5. So this command doesn't automatically give an output. You have to tell it what output it should give. And the way you do that is with the special word return. So when you type return, whatever you put right afterwards, that's the value that you want to give as your output. So for us, I'm going to use A because A is holding the answer that I just computed. So the last part of this is what you put right before the name of your command is the data type for your output. So in this case, I took a number with decimals as an input, and I'm going to give a number with decimals as an output. So I'm going to put double right here as a way of saying the kind of value I'm going to give back is a number with decimals. So this is the output data type. This is also called the return type. This is the output value, and it's usually called the return value because it's the value that this command is going to return as its output. And where it returns it to is back up here. So let's trace step by step what would happen if we ran this code. When we run this code, Java starts up here in main, and it says, I'm going to run this line of code. And it sees F, and it thinks that's not a built-in Java command. I wonder what I should do. And so it's going to look through the rest of your program until it finds your own definition of what the F command does. So it's going to look for public static something F. When it finds it, it says, aha, so here's how I know what to do when someone runs the F command. So we'll take the number 5, which is the input value, and 5 is going to get copied. 5 is going to get copied inside this variable x. So this variable is how you are able to send values to be used inside your command. So now that we've assigned 5 to x, and this happens automatically, by the way. So once we've assigned 5 to x, now you can run the rest of these lines of code just the way that it would normally run. So 2 times x would be 10, plus 5 is 15. 15 is going to get saved inside A. And then when you hit the return statement, you immediately exit from your command, and the value that it gives back is whatever you're returning here. So for us, this is the number 15. So the number 15 now is going to get sent back up here, and this entire expression gets replaced with the output value. So now we're assigning 15 to P, because what's on the right-hand side equals 15, and equal signs in Java mean assign what's on the right inside what's on the left. Okay, so Java commands are not just for doing calculations with numbers. They're for everything. We're going to show you some examples in just a second of how you can do things with text. You can have commands that don't take any input. You can have commands that just do something without actually returning an answer. So all of those are possible, and I'll show you examples of what all of those look like in just a second. If you'd like to see what the same example looks like to type, let's go ahead and type it. So here I have double P equals F of 5, and you see that F is in red, which means that Java doesn't know what that command is supposed to be. So I'm going to find the closing brace, hit enter a couple of times to create enough space. And now I'm going to define the f command by saying public static. Remember, this was where I give back the data type for the output. So this is going to output a number with decimals. So I'll type double because it's outputting a number with decimals. And then I'll have f, and now I'll define my input variable. All right, so let's do the calculation that we want. I'll say answer equals 2 times x plus 5, and then I'll return answer. So it's a pretty simple math function. If I ran it right now, you wouldn't actually see anything because I'm not actually running any display statements. So let's go ahead and print out f of 5 equals, and then the answer p here. And when I run it, it should say f of 5 equals 15. And there it is. F of 5 is 15.